Somewhere between the films everyone talks about and the ones nobody remembers, there's a sweet spot. These 10 R-rated thrillers hit harder than most blockbusters, and chances are you've missed at least half of them. The French Alps in winter. A mutilated body. Eyes sewn shut, hands cut off, left out in the cold like something ritualistic. That's the opening of The Crimson Rivers, and the film doesn't ease up from there. Jean Reno plays a veteran Paris detective, Vincent Cassel, a younger cop working a separate case in a nearby town. Two investigations, miles apart, slowly pulling toward the same dark center. Matthew Kassovitz directed it, and he understood that the mountain setting wasn't just backdrop. It's suffocating. These closed-off academic communities buried in snow, harboring something genuinely rotten. If Seven had been made in France and set at altitude, it might have looked something like this. That same operatic nastiness, but colder and stranger. The plot gets complicated toward the end, maybe a touch too tangled for its own good, but the atmosphere carries it. Reno and Castle together is reason enough. It's one of the slickest Euro thrillers of its era. Headhunters opens with a man who has everything and is terrified of losing it. Roger is a corporate recruiter in Oslo. Expensive house, beautiful wife, a lifestyle he absolutely cannot afford. So he steals art on the side. High-end stuff, clean and professional. He's good at it, and for a while that's enough. Then he meets Klaus Grieve. Ex-military, absurdly composed and sitting on a Rubens painting worth millions. Roger goes for it. That's the mistake that unravels everything. What follows gets vicious fast, and genuinely funny in the darkest possible way. The film understands that watching a man who built his entire identity around control slowly lose every shred of it is compelling in a way that straight action rarely is. The humiliation is the engine. Axel Hennie carries the whole thing on his face. You're cringing and rooting for him simultaneously, which is a difficult trick to pull off. Norwegian cinema doesn't get enough credit for this kind of sharp, propulsive storytelling, and Headhunters is the film that makes that case better than most. Lean, ruthless, and constantly one step ahead, it's the kind of thriller that doesn't just escalate, it traps you in the fallout. A private detective is hired to find out if a snuff film is real. That's the job. That's what pulls Tom Wells, an 8mm, into one of the darkest corners Nicolas Cage ever worked in. What's interesting is how seriously the film takes its own premise. Joel Schumacher isn't playing this for shock value, which you might expect. He's actually interested in what happens to a decent ordinary man who has to spend weeks immersed in genuinely evil material. Cage plays it quietly. There's no swagger here, just a guy getting hollowed out by what he's looking at. Joaquin Phoenix shows up as a sex shop clerk who knows the underground scene, and he's magnetic in a way that completely grounds the film every time it risks going too dark to follow. It bombed. Critics were uncomfortable with the subject matter and most audiences stayed away. But strip back the controversy and there's a genuinely well-constructed neo-noir underneath. Morally serious, well-acted, and far more restrained than its reputation suggests. It's seriously underrated. Cage has made wilder films and bigger films, but rarely a braver one. Dead Calm strips a thriller down to the absolute bare bones, proving isolation is the only special effect you really need. Sam Neill and Nicole Kidman play a grieving couple out on the Pacific, trying to process a family tragedy. Then Billy Zane rows over from a sinking ship. He's frantic, sweating, swearing his crew died from bad food. Neil doesn't buy a word of it. He takes a rowboat over to check the wreckage, and realizes too late he's been played. Zane hijacks the yacht with Kidman aboard, leaving Neil stranded on a boat that's actively taking on water. No neighbors, no Coast Guard, just endless horizon. Kidman is the engine making the whole thing run. She was 21, barely known outside Australia, and she carries the entire middle section alone. She's trapped with Zane, who plays this perfectly unreadable mix of charming and completely unhinged. Director Philip Noyce kept the whole production incredibly tight, trusting the tension to do the heavy lifting instead of throwing money at massive set pieces. There's no fat on the script, no wasted shots. Decades later, it still lands as one of the leanest, most ruthless thrillers of the 80s. Body Heat opens in a Florida heat wave, and director Lawrence Kasdan never lets you forget it. Everything is damp, slow, and slightly desperate. The kind of heat that makes bad decisions feel completely reasonable. William Hurt plays Ned Racine, a small-town lawyer who isn't particularly sharp. and the film knows exactly what it's doing with that. He meets Maddie Walker at an outdoor concert, Kathleen Turner's debut, and within 60 seconds you understand this man is already finished. He just doesn't know it yet. It's noir built on the bones of double indemnity. Married woman, weak man, a husband in the way. But Kasdan pushes it somewhere more direct and more modern. The atmosphere is suffocating, the sexuality is front and center, and the moral rot underneath never gets cleaned up or apologized for. Turner is the whole engine. Maddie is always one step ahead of every scene she's in, and the film quietly lets you feel that gap opening before Ned does. Every scene between them has this slow, creeping dread underneath the surface. You're watching a man being dismantled in real time and enjoying every second of it. The best traps are the ones you walk into willingly. Body Heat has always understood that, and 40 years on, it still does. Blue Ruin shows what happens when a director maxes out his credit cards, mortgages his house, and risks everything to make a thriller about a guy who completely sucks at revenge. Jeremy Saulnier bypassed the studios, crowdsourced a tiny $400,000 budget, and cast his childhood friend Macon Blair as a homeless drifter who accidentally triggers a bloody family feud. Dwight isn't an elite assassin. He's a terrified amateur with a rusty gun and zero tactical skills, making every single confrontation feel dangerously real. The tension comes from how out of his depth he is. It's a genuinely underrated gem that flew completely under the mainstream radar. Talking about how risky it all was, Saulnier said, "We had to make a movie that was undeniable, or I was going to have to file for bankruptcy." That desperate, do-or-die energy bleeds into every frame of the final cut. It ends up being one of the most grounded, nerve-shredding revenge films of its era. A desperate grab for quick cash cost The Last Seduction the easiest Oscar win of the 90s. Linda Fiorentino plays Bridget, a grifter who swipes $700,000 in drug money from her husband and bails to a small town. She just finds a local guy who's bored out of his mind and pulls him into cleaning up her trail. She's a predator, plain and simple. Fiorentino completely owns the screen with a calm, controlled edge that never slips. Knowing exactly what she had on the page, she walked into her first meeting and told the director, "You are not allowed to hire anyone but me for this film." She backed it up and became an absolute lock for Best Actress. But the independent distributor ran out of money trying to cover a $2.5 million deficit. They panicked, sold the broadcast rights to HBO, and aired it on television before giving it a theatrical run. Selling it to HBO before cinemas triggered a strict Academy rule that permanently disqualified the whole picture. They had the trophy right in their hands, and a cable broadcast burned it to the ground. Instead, it's gone down as one of the most overlooked neo-noirs of the 90s, the one that should have taken the Oscar and never even got the chance. Marshland drops you into a corner of Andalusia in 1980, 5 years after Spain's dictatorship ended, but the locals haven't seemed to notice. Two detectives roll down from Madrid to look into a couple of missing teenagers, forced to work together despite hating everything the other stands for. One is old guard, used to cracking skulls under the regime. The other's younger, pushing the new rules. The town doesn't trust either of them, and they definitely don't trust each other. Director Alberto Rodriguez pulled off a massive domestic hit on a tight €4 million budget by letting the location do the work. He uses aerial shots throughout that make everything feel wide open and uneasy. The friction between the two cops lines up with a country trying to bury its own ugly history, offering no easy answers at the end of the case. It builds tension slowly, then keeps tightening it. It's a grounded, methodical crime story that sticks with the details and lets the case unfold naturally. One of the strongest European crime films of the last decade, and still underseen outside Spain. A prison riot breaks out on the exact day a new guard arrives early for his first shift. He hasn't even signed his paperwork. Cell 211 traps him inside before he's technically even started the job, and his only option is to pretend he's an inmate. Director Daniel Monzon maximizes the claustrophobia by shooting the whole thing inside the abandoned Zamora prison,
Tu puta madre! Pasa pa' fuera!
letting decades of real rust and rotting concrete do the heavy lifting instead of faking it on a soundstage. Juan is the guard. Malamadre is the man running the riot, controlled, operating to his own code. Luis Tosar plays him with this quiet, coiled authority that makes every scene unpredictable. You understand him completely and trust him not at all, striking exactly the right balance. The Spanish prison system, the politics outside the walls, the hostage negotiations, it all feeds in without the film losing momentum. It stays visceral and immediate throughout. The tension comes from how the moral lines keep shifting. Juan does things to survive that the film doesn't forgive easily. It won 8 Goya Awards, including Best Film, and stands as one of the most gripping, hard-edged prison thrillers of its era. Tell No One opens with a couple swimming at a lake on a warm evening. It's calm, unhurried, genuinely tender. Then the night turns, and 8 years pass. Alexandre Beck is a Paris pediatrician who has quietly rebuilt his life after the murder of his wife. Then 2 bodies turn up near the lake where she died, and the same evening he receives an anonymous email, a video clip, a few seconds long, of a woman who looks exactly like her. Alive. In a crowd. Recent. Guillaume Canet directed this from a Harlan Coben novel and somehow made a French thriller that feels more American than most American thrillers. Propulsive, twisting, emotionally invested in its characters, in a way the genre often isn't. François Cluzet carries the whole weight of it. Every scene he's running from something or towards something, and you're completely locked in either way. Tell No One is the kind of thriller that reminds you how good the genre can be when nobody cuts corners. It's absolutely worth the watch. Tight, emotional, and just flat-out gripping from start to finish. If you're into films like this, there's plenty more on VintageVerse. Subscribe, drop your favorites below, and stick around, because the next list might be even better than this one.